Well, hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining Coffee Talk with Serge. You might notice we have a few new faces on the show today. Joining me this morning, afternoon, wherever you are, we have David Bianco, and he is a member of Serge and also an expert in cybersecurity and network monitoring, which we're going to get to a little bit later in the show, and also a SANS instructor as well. We also have Haylee Mills, and Haylee, we've had you on the show before. Both of you guys work at Splunk and are some of my favorite people at Splunk, so I'm super excited to have you on today. So we have a lot to talk about. I don't know if you guys are ready to get started, but let's just go ahead and roll the news clip.
Let's go for it.
All right, so our first story for today, Ukrainian intelligence officials issued a warning Monday that they believe the Kremlin plans to carry out massive cyber attacks on critical infrastructure in Ukraine. So I decided to lead with this story. Obviously, this is new intelligence that we're seeing. I don't know if it's based on new intelligence for Ukraine or, we've been hearing about the potential for cyber attacks before. But this message is interesting because it says that Ukrainian officials believe that the first blow will be aimed at the energy sector. And this actually cited the previous attacks in 2015 and 2016 on Ukraine's power grid. So officials, they also added that the Kremlin intends to increase DDoS attacks on Ukraine's closest allies. Specifically, they named Poland and the Baltic states in this warning. And we also have some interesting research from Mandiant that ties into this a little bit. Mandiant, which is now part of Google, said in a report that they've observed coordination, they think, between Russia's GRU, which is its military intelligence agency, and then also pro-Russia hackers. So at least in 4 instances where they've seen wiper malware installed on networks, they've attributed that to GRU activity. They also then observed hacktivists publishing data stolen from those same organizations. So they're saying this is a level of unprecedented coordination between hacktivists and the government in Russia, which is, an interesting strategy. And I'm curious what your guys' take is on this.
Well, me personally, it's sort of a par for the course, but maybe perhaps unprecedented at the level of scale or like what they're willing to do or recruit people to do. Because Russia's been playing the cyber warfare game with Ukraine since like the early 2000s, and I'm sure there's money changing hands here and there to make things happen. But obviously, with the war and so on, of course, it's going to escalate and escalate. And Ukraine's had hacktivists on their side as well, often working pro bono. So now Russia's willing to make some investments in their strategy.
Yeah, I mean, they should, because they've basically had this as part of the cornerstone of their policies since like at least 2007, when they started their cyber attacks on Estonia. But obviously, they don't just come up overnight. So they've probably been working on that for even longer than the 15 years they've been public on it. So yeah, I mean, it was, and this isn't even the first time during the Ukrainian war that they've had cyber attacks against Ukraine. So I totally understand that, this is probably a credible thing that's going to happen at some point. It's like targeting the infrastructure. And that whole thing about the increased coordination between the Russian military intelligence, like the GRU, with the supposedly private hacker groups is an escalation, but it's kind of a logical escalation, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, other countries even have been doing this for a while, but not to this level where the GRU will compromise and wipe out the data at an organization, and then suddenly it shows up in the black market from a totally supposedly unconnected hacker group.
Right. And that definitely gives Russia, a level of plausible deniability. If they can say, this wasn't us, it was hacktivists, right? Also, I want to point out Ryan just left a comment for us. Hello from Stuttgart in Germany. Ryan is traveling today, so we'll say hello to Ryan, and we miss you. Looking forward to when you come back, and Mick is also traveling today as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. Moving on now to our next story today. This one is interesting, and I know, David, you have a lot of thoughts on this. So Vice Motherboard published a story last week about an internet monitoring tool called Augury, or Pure Signal Recon. And so a private company called Cymru has reportedly sold the tool to branches of the US military and claims that it covers more than 90% of the world's internet traffic. But this is where it's important to clarify, right? Are we talking about net flow traffic? Are we talking about PCAP data? So in a letter to the US Inspector General, Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, who is a huge proponent of data privacy, he said that a whistleblower contacted his office about the alleged warrantless use and purchase of NetFlow data by NCIS from this private company. And so this letter, it cites public contracting records indicating that this tool provides access to petabytes of network data with hundreds of collection points worldwide, updated each day with billions of records. So, it also says that some of this data includes email PCAP data, web browser activity, like, web cookies and the URLs that a person accesses. But this was, one of the issues, David, that you had here was whether or not this was a little bit misleading, the difference between NetFlow data and PCAP data. There's a quote in this article from a cybersecurity expert who's not named. It says, quote, "It's everything. There's nothing else to capture except the smell of electricity." So David, what do you make of this in terms of, the difference with NetFlow data in terms of tracking malicious activity and then also tracking user activity? How concerned should people be about this?
Well, I will start by saying first, there may be some legitimate concerns here. Like anytime government agencies especially try to buy giant giant swaths of internet activity about users, you kind of think, oh, is this something like they should have gotten a warrant for, but now they're just buying it, so they're sidestepping correct process? I don't know that that's happening. I'm just saying that people are right to be looking into this. So I'm not trying to say like this article is totally off base, but it is kind of misleading. I think I'm not sure exactly why, but they made some claims that they didn't quite back up, and it seems like they were conflating the idea of packet captures, which are all the bits and bytes that were sent over a particular network connection, with NetFlow records, because they're probably just due to the fact that we're sending the estimates that I saw were somewhere between 6 and 8 exabytes of data over the internet every day. There's no way they're collecting exabytes every day of packet capture information and then reselling it. That most likely it's network flow data, which is just the meta information about the patterns of communication, who's talking to who, how long they talked and when, and how much data they transferred, which sure could be abused even, but I kind of suspect, without really I've never had access to this data source, so I can't verify it, but I think that they probably aren't even collecting all of that information. It's probably sampled. At least a lot of it is probably sampled. So random sampling of like typically 1 out of every 1,000 records or something like that would be saved. So not so much used necessarily for spying on individuals, but like if you're trying to search for other computers that are contacting the known malicious servers, a very valuable database. So it's kind of weird. This article didn't really go into enough detail on the technical side to back up its claims of overreaching government surveillance. They may totally be true. I don't know, but because I don't know, because it wasn't in the article.
Right. Haylee, what do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking that it's because, yeah, I mean, we know there's surveillance at levels we can't even comprehend. So, I mean, the fact that most of this data is that NetFlow, like higher level metadata stuff, it's hard to tell if this, violates any constitutional rights to privacy or something like that. Because I like to think of it almost like how, you can take footage of a public area because you're in a public space, and they're sort of like, plain text traffic on the internet going through various websites. I don't think Team Cymru has access to, or whoever made the augury tool has access to like sitting in front and man in the middling. They're sort of like sitting on these sort of like public areas to gather this information. So it's sort of like, observing a pedestrian on a CCTV, which also feels kind of weird, but is it actually invading privacy? It's hard to say. And, there are other tools that the government undoubtedly has at their disposal if they really want to get to that really nitty-gritty detail. And like David said, there's so much information being transferred every day that it's probably not to the degree, or I don't think we're getting the everything but the smell of electricity from everyone at all times.
Right. That's an important clarification. I think that's one of the challenges with reporting on technical topics, right? For readers who may not be well versed in the difference between net flow and PCAPs, what do you make of this, right? How large scale is this data collection, and what does that mean for me as a reader, right? And so, one of the quotes I saw in this article from the private company that makes this or sells this tool, it says that the platform does not provide user or subscriber information. It doesn't provide results that show any pattern of life to target individuals. It only captures a limited sampling of available data, restricted to queries against restricted samples, limited data, which all originates from malware, malicious activity, honeypots, etc. And I thought it was interesting because this article also mentioned a situation where Citizen Lab in Toronto actually used this tool apparently to identify a computer that was infected with spyware through one of their investigations, which kind of aligns with tracking malicious activity, right? So if you have like a C2 server, you can track potentially traffic using this tool, which is interesting. So that was, I appreciated that they had an example of how this was used, to track network activity.
Yeah, there is a significant public upside to having this information available.
Yes.
I mean, it's really like comes down to who's using it, right? And is that use appropriate? But even at that level, they didn't really go into it. Like,
right.
We just have to assume that if the federal government is using it, they're automatically up to no good. But I'm not sure if that's really true.
Yeah, it's unclear. And that, there have been past examples like the whole X mode data broker. I don't know if you remember that story. It was cited in here too, where this was a data broker that was selling location data from a Muslim prayer app to U.S. military contractors, which clearly could, raise some concerns, right? So I think it's good to always ask questions. What Senator Ron Wyden's doing. I think it's important to do that just in case, we don't know exactly how this is being used. So all right, so let's move on to our third news story, which is our ransomware and extortion roundup. And I included extortion today because our first story leans more on the extortion side versus the ransomware side. And this one is the Optus data breach. So this is a hacker who claims to have breached Optus, which is Australia's second largest telco. They've now withdrawn their extortion demands, and they're citing increased scrutiny from law enforcement. So this article from Bleeping Computer reports that this breach includes names, birthdays, phone numbers, emails, addresses for nearly 10 million customers, plus driver's licenses and passport numbers for nearly 3 million customers. But we're told no passwords or financial information was compromised. So this alleged hacker also apologized on a hacker forum for leaking the data of more than 10,000 people on a forum. But still, some of these victims are getting, messages threatening that their data is going to be sold unless they pay up. So it's unclear who's sending those messages, since the data was leaked publicly. So this is a large-scale data breach, and it's definitely concerning for many people in Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that information is sort of like it can be used at this level, but you didn't get the money, so then you sell it at this level, or you apologize because you don't want to get in trouble for what you already did. And I think it's interesting how now that there are sometimes consequences. I think it was the pipeline hack that U.S. government got Interpol involved and sort of narrowed down the group. And so these groups that maybe take off a bite bigger that they can chew, or they hit a company that can sort of restore from backups and all that stuff. So their whole extortion scheme doesn't really work. Then they're in danger at some level. But then you have these other feeders that are well, they're in danger, but I'm willing to message these 10,000 people and attempt to get something out of them. So it's just really interesting. Just the past 2 years have been bonkers as we see different situations and as things get more complex. It's wild to see.
Yeah, and in this case, it reads very much like maybe not a novice, but a relatively unsophisticated individual, maybe even bit off more than they can chew, and they're not enjoying the find out phase. And my favorite part, though, is how they, in one sentence, apologize for doing this thing, but then turn around and blame the victim. And they're like, I'm really sorry for this, Optus, but I would have reported it if you had a vulnerability disclosure policy published. It's okay, that's a non-apology. I don't know exactly what you think you're going to achieve with that, but they're still coming after you. So.
Right. And there's definitely a threshold, right? If you're a threat actor, you want to hit a big target, but not too big, because then, that's, when you see the colonial pipeline types of attacks where the FBI gets involved and, somehow they were able to retrieve all that cryptocurrency. And I still don't know how that all played out. But anyway, so moving on to our next ransomware story, a toolkit to build versions of LockBit 3.0, the ransomware, was leaked last week. So the record reports that someone possibly connected to LockBit attributed this leak to a disgruntled ransomware affiliate. So there's concerns that this leak could make attribution more difficult if other threat actors start to use this builder, which we've seen this happen before with Babook had their builder leaked at one point. And then when we saw the Conti chat leaks, that also led to their builder being used by other groups.
Yeah, and even with Conti, there was the almost organizational training manuals, here's how to hack people, try this, then this, then this, then this. So there was a lot of almost their learning management system was hacked. So I'm sure that information gets distributed and sort of open sourced into these new affiliate groups or groups that just want to spin up something for themselves. So yeah, attribution is an interesting thing that gets even muddier now that we see the tool set leaked.
Well, I mean, we kind of know in general that attributing just based on the tool is a recipe for probably bad intel in the long term. I mean, we even as far back in my experience as I think it was 2009 or maybe 2010, we saw Ghost Rat coming. It was initially used to attack the Dalai Lama. Nobody had any issues attributing who might be wanting to attack the office of the Dalai Lama and surveil them. But then the source code got leaked and it's on GitHub, and all the other threat actors were just this is a pretty decent tool. I'm gonna fork this and use it now. And then suddenly it was just no, it was everywhere, and it was one of the most popular rats for a while. And I think LockBit being, by the way, the winner of our speed derby, the Surge ransomware encryption speed derby that we published earlier this year. This is 3.0, so it's supposedly even faster than LockBit 2.0, which is the one we measured. It's going to be an attractive target for anybody who wants to set up their own little ransomware operation, avoid paying as a service fees, and use good quality ransomware. So yeah. I definitely expect that you will start seeing a lot more LockBit 3 out in the wild.
Yes. And speaking of LockBit, last episode, we said that LockBit was asking people to start tattooing their logo, and they offered to pay anyone $1,000 if they did this. Well, surprise, surprise, a guy who made one of these tattoos claims that LockBit scammed him. So are you guys shocked to see this?
I don't know. It's interesting because ransomware operators early on had a reputation for actually doing what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
Which was the shocking part, actually, to me. So now we're getting to the part where it's like, yeah, that is probably going away.
So, I'm not very surprised by this at all, but I figured that was worth an update that, don't tattoo yourself with ransomware logos, please. It's not worth it.
I got to cancel plans this weekend.
Removing tattoos isn't so easy. So I was wondering if he was trying to scam the LockBit, and LockBit tried to scam him at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah, surprise, it's a stick-on. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on now to some of our upcoming events. So we have, this is really exciting. Mick Baccio is speaking at the United Nations Common Secure Conference, and this is in Valencia, Spain. He's actually leaving on Sunday for this, which is very exciting. Ryan Kovar, as we mentioned, he's in Europe right now, but then he'll be heading over to Vancouver next month with Shannon Davis, presenting their ransomware research on the encryption speeds at the Digital Crimes Consortium in Vancouver. Also a member of Surge is speaking at the Zero Day Conference in Geneva next month. One other thing to mention, happening right now, we have Bots America's Day. And so this is, if you're not familiar with Boss of the Sock, it's a blue team capture the flag. And Tom Smith is pretty much the lead organizer of this event right now. And so I had a chance to talk to him last week. And here is a short clip of him explaining what Boss of the Sock is and what we can expect for regional events.
The first time I played Bots or Boss of the Sock, I will say, and there's some gray area here, I think that I won. It was Boss of the Sock version 2, and it was for sales engineers in Plano, Texas. And it was run by Ryan and Dave, who were the creators of Boss of the Sock. We are entering into our 8th year. We've actually started planning for version 8 now. A lot of our previous work is available for free up on bots.splunk.com. So customers and users can go up to that site and enroll in the very first version of Boss of the Sock to get a feel for what the experience is. And yes, it is a blue team exercise that relies on Splunk and security knowledge. But as we all know, in the real world, not everything is in Splunk. So there's a lot of OSINT. And if you're good at investigative work, you're going to have fun at Bots. You can just tell when you're in the room with people how much they love this experience and how much they enjoy going through the process of trying to find answers and trying to find problems and find adversaries and data. Personally, honestly, it's one of the major reasons that I love working at Splunk, because it just jazzes our customers so much. And we have very basic core enterprise searches that you're going to run with your favorite SPL commands. We have enterprise security. We have RBA sprinkled in there. We do have SOAR. If you go back far enough, we actually have UBA in Bots as well, which was a really fun time. The beauty of Boss of the Sock is that we have a ton of fun creating this, but then it all turns into the workshops that our customers get to utilize throughout the year and are available up on bots.splunk.com.
So as Tom mentioned, we have a bunch of regional events for Boss of the Sock, and here are just a couple of the upcoming ones. November 10th, we have our APAC regional event, but this is, not limited to just, the Asia Pacific region. This, anyone who's available can sign up. We have 2 different time zones, or I guess time slots. One is 9 a.m., the other is 2:00 p.m., and this is in Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And if you're curious, I just heard from Tom that we had more than 700 people sign up for today's event, which is super exciting. And it wasn't just from North America. We had people from Africa, Europe, and Asia all register for today's event, which was really exciting. All right, well, with that, let's go ahead and roll the 60-second charity challenge clip.
And now, Splunk's Cybersecurity 60-second charity challenge. Remember the rules. You've got to get through an entire subject in 60 seconds, or you donate to today's charity of choice. Good luck!
All right, so today's 60-second charity challenge is about domain shadowing. So I saw an article in Bleeping Computer about this, basically saying that this phenomenon is more prevalent than previously thought. And this is according to research from Palo Alto's Unit 42. And so I have to admit, when I saw this article, I was not familiar with the concept of domain shadowing at all. So I thought it would be fitting for this challenge to have both of you guys explain to me what it is and why it's hard to detect. So who wants to go first?
Haylee, you choose.
All right, I'll go first.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so domain shadowing is the fun technique of hijacking some DNS, either through like taking a username and password from someone you're able to crack, get into their DNS settings, and insert subdomains that either host malicious content or just link to malicious content. The idea being that you get past a lot of the sort of like reputation filters and virus total and so on. So the team from this article did a bunch of research about how prevalent this is, and of the definitely malicious subdomains they found, very few were marked malicious on virus total. But it may be hard to detect, but my engineer brain thought of a few things you could do, like potentially just run a script that just gets your DNS from a website and then make an alert for when you see that changes. There's all sorts of things you could do, but that's the gist of domain shadowing, but we clearly have to keep an eye out for it.
All right, well done.
Congratulations. All right.
In a domain shadowing attack, the threat actor first gains access to a legitimate domain's DNS server through compromised credentials, some sort of exploit or whatever means. Once in, they don't change any of the existing records because they're trying to be stealthy. They just add new ones. So for example, if the legit domain is good.com, they might add just a single new entry, say like evil.good.com, that points to the IP address of a host that they control somewhere else on the internet. They could then send those evil URLs and phishing emails all over the world. Web proxies or any other controls based on domain reputation won't alert, since good.com is a sterling citizen. This is all just a way to leech off an existing domain's good reputation. So secure your DNS servers, folks. Monitor for changes to your records, and don't let the bad guys profit from your good reputation.
Wow.
Wow.
Bravo.
Okay, I concede this one because David's was very well articulated and potentially written down. I thought we were freestyling this.
There are no rules.
Down.
60 seconds.
What are you talking about?
As long as you're within time. But yeah, I think David's some of your SANS training definitely came into play there with your teaching skills. So congratulations.
Right. Certified SANS instructor.
Yes. And Haylee, you did great as well. And yeah, I think it's an interesting, type of DNS hijacking. So awesome work. And today's charity that we've chosen is Girls Who Code. And so this is a program that works to educate and equip girls with the computing skills to pursue opportunities that involve coding. And with that, let's go ahead and transition now to our deep dive.
And now we talk about things that just happen to be on our minds with who's ever here, because we made this up before I knew who'd accept my meeting invite.
All right, so today we are talking about the Uber hack, which we mentioned in the last episode, but the new developments here is that police in the UK arrested a 17-year-old last week as part of what they're calling a hacking investigation. And this is not confirmed, but it's believed to be related to the Uber and Rockstar hacks. And so just yesterday, Bruce Schneier authored an opinion piece in the New York Times, basically saying that this Uber hack is an example that companies might actually have an incentive to skimp on security at the expense of security, like personal and national security. And he argues that if we want to do better, we have to change the market incentives. And so here's the article right there, which I thought was really interesting. And I recommend, anyone who's interested in this story, read this, because he has some great thoughts about this. And I'm curious, if you guys agree or what you're seeing from this.
I think yes. I mean, I will almost never say Bruce Schneier is wrong about anything, because he's actually great. But I would say it's not just a matter of the incentives. That is true. It is often not a strong financial incentive for a company to spend a lot of information security money and resources, especially as he's talking about in his article, especially when you're just getting started and you're not really an established company with a lot of resources that you could throw at things. But I would also say, it's the other part of it is like, this stuff isn't easy. Even companies that I've worked for that have substantial resources to put to it, they don't operate like, oh, we have solved security and now we're not going to ever get breached. They typically operate in like, we are already breached, we need to find out how so we can stop it. So it's not only that there's perverse incentives basically, but it's also that it's just legitimately difficult, especially at the scale of some of these large companies like Microsoft. Come on, very, very difficult to have good visibility into everything that's going on and understand what every single event means.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's as on the blue team, it's defense in depth to try and catch at every possible level. But on the other side, it's like we found a hole and now we got through. And on top of this, it's the difficulty. I think in both of these hacks, it was abusing like multi-factor authentication, sort of spam, just spamming people with requests for a multi-factor auth. And unfortunately, like, you can do security as well as you want, and multi-factor is a great way of doing that. But if people sort of become numb to it, there's some like educational or awareness aspect and implementation aspect that's really hard to control for, and like really hard to get humans to sort of follow the rules and not want to bypass them, even if they feel like it's so benign. So yeah, whenever things like this happen, I am, if anything, empathetic. I'm not like condescending, like how could big company X not, find this? That would never happen to us. Ha ha ha. Because karma is a word, as they say. And I'm just when I see this, it just makes me realize how much further we have to go as far as not just technical controls, but also just like getting the public understanding about what security is and how they can help. Right.
Yeah. And I think in this article, he says basically the gist of it is that the market does not reward healthy security, and I think there's some truth to that. But I also think that there's, the fact that this is an opinion piece in the New York Times might be changing that perspective a little bit. Do you think that we might be turning a corner in terms of, the allegations from Peter Zatko with Twitter and what we're seeing with Uber and these high profile stories, that maybe, there might be more proactive steps taken in terms of improving security at these companies?
I mean, maybe, but the other way you could spin that is, I don't have to care about big security incidents unless I'm a giant company like Twitter.
That's fair. And a lot of this, he says, customers don't exactly know what's going on behind the curtain, right? That's another point in this article, which is very valid. And if people don't know, then where's the incentive there as well? So, the more we see these stories appear, the more likely I think that it is for companies to have an incentive to be proactive about this and maybe invest more in security, whereas before it maybe was an afterthought,
security awareness. And like I like to think of just recently I saw Rachel Tobach a post about her like musical security awareness training, which sounds awesome because I love musicals. I know I would learn a lot from that, and I kind of just want to watch it just to see it. But I think there's so much further we have to go as far as security pervading people's like thoughts about how things work, because ultimately it's all like abusing trust, and people are naturally trusting, which is adorable and wonderful that humans are like that. But also now with this cyber threat landscape, we have to figure out where we can teach people and not feel like we're shaming them to help us do our jobs.
Yeah, it's just an awful lot for a company to keep on top of. I absolutely agree that even small companies should be able to pay attention to security, spend whatever they need to do a proper risk assessment and mitigate some of those risks. But I dislike the armchair quarterbacking after the big data breaches have occurred, because most of the people that get out there and talk about how this company should have done this and should have done that have never actually done it. So, my sympathy is usually very much with the security teams at those companies for that time and for years later as they're dealing with the aftermath of it. So
hopefully they get to spend a nice new big budget.
Yeah. I definitely have some ideas what they could spend that money on, but
yeah, well, maybe we'll talk about that in the next episode. It's a whole nother topic. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're a bit over time. I would love to talk about this more, but thank you both so much for coming on the show. It was so great to have you, and maybe we'll have you on again soon. So with that, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Surge.